A war to be remembered. 3. Ewig Kate is one of the many major elements in DaoistqZxYMH. It is a sorcery created to spiritually merge an underworld with its wielder, thereby granting them superhuman capabilities. This form of sorcery is possessed by most characters in DaoistqZxYMH. Most forms of sorcery use life force as their fuel, and it was rather common for sorcerers in the ancient era to use the blood or even the soul of a living being to enhance their craft. The phenomenon of an underworld choosing its wielder and seeking souls as sustenance was not uncommon since ancient times. However, these cases always end with the wielders being destroyed by their attraction to their own relic. In other words, there are virtually no benefits for someone wielding a relic. Ewig Kate seeks to reform that. Its creation allows a wielder to form a symbiotic relationship with their relic. By taking in a vast number of souls, the wielder also grows stronger in return. The wielder gains life force equivalent to the number of lives they have devoured, greatly augmenting their physical capabilities while making it significantly harder for them to die. Possessing 100 souls means having 100 times more life force than a normal person. As such, the strength of such a person is fundamentally different from that of a human, therefore, not even the strongest military weaponry can leave a scratch on them. But that is all well and good. What we have here is something entirely different. Poseidon's trident is also a Zanpakuto and therefore part of him. He has turned his weapon, his very soul, into something unfathomable, a divine, Ewig Kate, and he is fueling it with divine souls, absorbing their powers and growing stronger through that. And he has just fed his trident, the first one in this war, Thor Odinson. With Poseidon. Gasp. The different deities watch as Poseidon raises his trident into the air, with Thor Odinson pierced on it. The young god, with the blood of an elder god in him, looks surprised. He was so used to being strong, powerful and mighty. He never lost a fight, unless it was against his father, Odin. He wielded Mjolnir, the hammer holding a galactic storm inside it, and was so powerful, and yet here he was, pierced on the trident of Poseidon. He feels his soul being absorbed, along with all his strength. There. No. Odin roars across the monstrous battlefield and swings Gungnir through the air, destroying the black hole, which has been holding him back and moving towards his sun. But no matter how fast he moved and how much power he used, Odin didn't reach Poseidon. Not in time. With a haunting calm, Poseidon's hand tightened around the shaft of his trident. Thor's body twitched one last time as divine body and soul were absorbed into the trident. What was once the thunder god, bold and proud, was reduced to fragments of power and essence, used as fuel and sustenance. The trident hummed, its shape shifting, and suddenly, he held a long golden pipe in his hands. The same one he used all the time through which he channeled steam. Picture. Foo. Well, that was dramatic, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. So this is thunder, spicy. Odin crashed onto the battlefield with a boom that shook the crust of the earth. Gungnir spun in his hand, his eyes flaring with golden fire. The Allfather of Asgard, rage incarnate, landed like the apocalypse, yet even then, he was too late. Thor. He roared, a brokenness in his voice that no warrior's pride could hide. His gaze met Poseidon's, and the battlefield held its breath. You will pay for this. Poseidon exhaled slowly from his pipe, letting out a thick wisp of scented steam that glowed faintly. The scent was strangely calming, almost like sea breeze and sun-drenched beaches, but its presence now held something additional to it. I already have, Poseidon said calmly. The battlefield paused. Gods and monsters alike watched, uncertain whether the war had just escalated or if it had already been decided. The death of a god and one so final was rare. Ares was brimming with fury and drunk on his increasing power. Ares, though driven by fury, was no fool. The god of war roared and charged toward Poseidon, not out of blind rage, at least not solely, but out of principle. He sought to fight, destroy and reclaim glory, unable to stomach the spectacle of one of their side falling so pathetically. But as he lifted his weapon, Odin, still glowing with divine rage, unleashed a wave of raw power. Boom! The shockwave hit Ares like a mountain falling from the sky. He wasn't powerful enough to withstand the release of power from the Allfather. He was blasted backwards, skidding across the battlefield in a trail of dust and blood, his momentum halted by the overwhelming force of the Allfather and hitting someone else in the process. Stay out of this, boy, Odin growled, his eyes still locked on Poseidon. This was no longer just a battle between gods. This was something greater. The pride and love of a father were now involved. Odin lifted Gungnir and swung it down full force. Poseidon, however, didn't move. The steam he had created earlier was special. As the divine spear fell, the steam condensed rapidly, taking shape in midair. To Odin's shock, a figure blocked his strike, a figure with golden hair and storm-charged eyes. Thor. But it wasn't the same Thor. He radiated with power, and his expression carried both sorrow and determination. He parried Odin's strike with Mjolnir, not just once, but twice, forcing the Allfather back with jarring blows, as his emotions were in turmoil. Odin hesitated. His son, no, the image, the imprint of his son, was defending Poseidon. The one who had killed him in the first place. His pain and rage mixed together. This is blasphemy, Odin growled. He roared and cut through Thor with Gungnir, with tears in his eyes. Killing the image of his son hurts him more than he can describe. However, when he turns towards Poseidon, Thor regenerates. Odin overpowers his son again, only to see another figure rise from the steam. Then another. And another. Bor Burison. Bestla. Billy Borson. Bay Borson. Each face, father, mother, brothers and Thor emerged in silent rebuke, forged from the divine mist and shaped by Poseidon's command. They were Odin's blood, his legacy, his guilt, resurrected not in body, but in Poseidon's will. Each one bore the face of a loved one, each recreated with divine precision by Poseidon's will and through the steam infused with Thor's essence, not only looking like them, but also feeling like them. All carried remnants of their divine might. All remembered who had led them to their deaths. And all struck Odin down with blows that pierced not only his physical body, but his spirit as well. The battlefield trembled as Odin fought them, carving through family and memory alike. But with each one he struck down, another appeared, rising like ghosts from the storm. VRRRRROOOOM. A surge of divine pressure expanded outward as Odin exploded and used more of his Odin force, fueling his power and attributes beyond the limits he had ever had. The steam finally receded somewhat, leaving the battlefield broken. But neither of the two was done. This was only the beginning. I will destroy you, vermin. How dare you? What is it with you, fortunately created creatures of divine nature, that you believe you stand above the simple principles of action and reaction? Your actions have consequences, Odin Borson. You believe yourself to be above others, but you aren't. Your wisdom is not as all-encompassing as you thought. Remember, you started this. Instead of answering, Odin struck forward, swinging Gungnir through the air with all his might. The Odin force is augmenting him and increasing his power beyond what it was before. Time slowed down as these two monsters clashed. Space and time splintered like a fragile mirror as the spear and the trident clashed. Odin whispered words, using his power over runes as they fought, to try to hurt Poseidon and deal damage to him. Gaia worked overtime to protect their dimension and Earth from annihilation, as the battle grew to unimaginable degrees. The power of Poseidon's trident was unimaginable at this point. A soul-cutter weapon, and a Ewig Kate, as well as a divine weapon, it was truly one of a kind. Odin cut through the air, splitting spacetime as he did so. Poseidon moved to the side and swung the trident down vertically. But when their weapons were about to collide again, something unexpected happened. The trident became as flexible as water and bent around Gungnir and cut Odin's chest, drawing blood. Raahhhhh. Odin moved back and then attacked again, pushing his body further. He used the Odin force and pierced Gungnir forward. Poseidon did the same. He pulled back the trident and infused it with the power of vibrations and waves. A turquoise bubble appeared around the three prongs. Then, Poseidon pierced the trident forward, meeting Odin's Gungnir in the middle. BBBBROOOOOOOOMMMM. With Ra. Ra was dealing with more fighters than Poseidon or anyone else, and for good reason. Zeus was a horny prick. Apollo was as well, but he wanted Ra's authority over the divinity of the sun. Artemis had her own things going on. Hermes wanted to do something of worth and help his father as well, but was intercepted by Cronus. Several flaming arrows shoot through the air, aiming to kill her. Ra waves her hand through the air, making the arrows turn around and fly back towards Apollo. She has a displeased expression on her face, since she doesn't like the amount of lust directed at her. It makes her stomach turn to think about all those who were victims of the perverts. You will need more practice, child, she says as she accelerates the flaming arrows and increases their potency. Before the arrows can harm Apollo, though, 3 arrows containing the power of the moon intercept them, being fired from Artemis. Zeus shouts in rage as his children dare to interfere in his fight. Poseidon has said it before, fate favors him in his story. This means that by being so below Ra in this fight, he grows more powerful as he stretches his powers and pushes himself further. One had to wonder what he could have achieved had he focused on training instead of R***ping would ever had a hole. But he was still not aware of who he was facing here. This was a god king, from a powerful pantheon. Speed was one of Ra's strong suits, but compared to beings like Zeus and Hermes, she still fell a bit short. Poseidon had taught her how to focus on all aspects of her divinities and nurture them. But it took time. Unsheathing her soul cutter sword, Ra slashed through the air and cut through Zeus's fist, attempting to split his entire arm in half. However, Zeus' speed allowed him to pull back before that could happen, keeping his soul from being damaged further. Ra punched out, about to hit Zeus, when several attacks appeared in front of her. Someone had used this moment of weakness to strike her blind side while using Apollo and Artemis attacks. Hundreds of arrows covered the sky, forcing Ra to block them. Holding out her palm, a small sun appeared, growing in size. Ra threw the small ball of flames into the air, reaching the deadly attacks, before they reached her. The sun started to absorb the power of Apollo's arrows and reached critical mass. ZOOOOOOOOOOM. The sun imploded and grew immediately, scorching the ground and the air, burning the lungs of all who were too close. But as stated, those attacks from Artemis and Apollo weren't the true threat, that came from Ra's blind side. Athena's spear shot was about to pierce Ra's back. With the speed of a god king, she swung her sword through the air, about to block it. However, in that moment, Zeus' fist finally connected with her body. Her reflexes overrode her intention and blocked the strike of Zeus. Her forearm trembled under the growing power of the king of Olympus, while Athena's spear managed to pierce Ra's back. The queen bit her teeth together, biting through the pain she felt in that moment. Fire ignited in her eyes, promising pain, lots of pain. She grabbed Athena's spear so that she couldn't pull it out again. Then she kicked Zeus in the face with a front kick and sent him hurtling through the air, hitting Apollo along the way. Ra didn't push the spear out, no, she fucking pulled. The goddess of wisdom hadn't seen that coming, that such a beauty like Ra would injure herself further and be so savage. But that was all that mattered, the moment which Ra seized. Her right fist glowed with unknown power, she hadn't revealed it to anyone yet. Her anger had grown tremendously, and she released it now. All-life eradicating fist. Nuclear fission. Using her divinity of radiation and the martial arts that Poseidon had taught her, Ra replicated a nuclear reaction and channeled it into her fist, enabling her to deliver a punch that triggered a nuclear explosion. BBBOOOOOOOOOMMMMM. I can promise that I will continue. Real life has a way of hitting you when you least expect it. 31 comments 0 vote. A war to be remembered IV. All-life eradicating fist. Nuclear fission. Ra's fist impacted Athena's face. BBBOOOOOOOOOMMMMM. It was at this moment that the great and wise strategist Athena realized that she had made a grave miscalculation. But one must understand that her thought process wasn't all that faulty to begin with. It made sense from her perspective and observations to think that Ra was the weaker part of the marriage between the rulers of the pantheon of the sun's tide, and she was. But Athena had very little to go on, since she experienced from her own pantheon that Hera was so much weaker than Zeus. So, Athena theorized that by taking out Ra and holding her hostage, they would get a great advantage over Poseidon and potentially get him to surrender. They were in love. Athena had checked with Aphrodite to see just how much they were in love. And when Aphrodite checked, she almost passed out, telling Athena that their love burned hotter than the sun and stronger than the greatest of ocean tsunamis all at once. That was all Athena needed to hear. Surely, Poseidon would surrender. The plan was simple, but not easy, of course. Athena waited for the right moment, watching Zeus grow faster and stronger over time. As she read the battle, she struck when Artemis and Apollo attacked simultaneously. She managed to pierce Ra, even if she missed all vital organs. But she couldn't expect what Ra would do. It was ungraceful, and so unlike a queen of the pantheon to do what she did. And Athena paid for her ignorance and failure to understand the relationship between Ra and Poseidon. The feelings between them, even if they started a bit strangely, had time to grow strong. Both of them pushed the other higher and motivated the other to keep improving. Ra was anything but idle, despite the power she possessed. Athena crashed into the ground, her face a bloody mess of brain matter and cerebral fluids. How long it would take her to get back was uncertain, but it would take a while. Ra's wounds were covered in a green light and then healed on their own. Ra looked to the side and saw Cronus, who had used his power. Hermes was not looking good on the ground. The former king of the Titans was far beyond what the young Godeling could do. Ross smiled at that and shook his head. She realized that Cronus was more or less there to look after her and not as a powerful fighter for their side. She doesn't get time to concern herself about it as a wave of death rushes towards her. She slashes her sword through the air, cutting through Osiris's attack and getting back into the fight. With all the other fighters. Hades blocked an attack from Tyr. The Norse god of war was following the initiative of Odin and was pumped up, seeing the ruler of the Norse pantheon go all out. His sword hit Hades' bident, causing it to vibrate. Hades' feet were on the ground, slowing down his momentum as he was pushed back. But his attention was not on the fight. Instead, he observed his wife, Persephone, who Heimdall was currently engaging. His wife was not that proficient in fighting in battle. She wasn't fit for it, and it went against her nature. Hades had tried to get her to train with him somewhat, but seeing her pushing her feelings down, made him stop. Still, seeing the seriousness of their situation, Persephone managed to give rise to several plants and have them block the attacks from Heimdall. Focus! Tyr shouted angrily. Hades' attention was pulled back for a moment. He blocked the attack again and swung his bident through the air. He pushed harder than he did before, and pumped the power of the dead into each of his swings. As the god of the dead in the underworld, he was not the fastest, but Poseidon had told him that he didn't need to. There was something about the dead in the underworld that only Hades could replicate. Wait. The word death or the dead themselves were always heavy. The idea of death was so final, and it weighed heavily on mortals and gods as well. Fear and that weight was what Hades had in reserve, and that's what he used. Tyr pushed against the weight of Hades' attacks. He tried to increase his speed to catch Hades off guard, but it didn't work. An invisible pull slowed Tyr down, without him understanding how or what it was. His body felt heavy and slowed down, like wading through muddy terrain. And then, he finally slipped and couldn't block an attack. Swing. Hades' bident slashed through Tyr's midsection, making him bleed in surprise. And a second later, a powerful punch landed on his temple, sending the Norse god through the air. Hades looked to the side and disappeared into the shadows. He reappeared right next to Persephone and blocked an attack from Heimdall's greatsword. Hades, what are you doing? Persephone asked. I'm taking over, wife. Get to Demeter, that was the only reason I allowed you to come today, Hades said coolly. All right. Hades focused on Heimdall and looked at his sister, Demeter, as she was frantically trying to catch Frigga and hurt her. Hades doesn't have a problem with his siblings, contrary to what most people believe. Apart from Poseidon and Hestia, the others can't handle his godly nature. His divinities make it hard for most to relax in his presence. And while that makes it hard to be him, right now, it's what he uses to the fullest. Seeing that Persephone is away, he puts on the helm of darkness, his symbol of power. The effect is immediate and powerful. His figure disappears, and all sounds from him cease to exist. An intense fear begins to radiate off the helm, spreading into the surroundings and affecting the gods and soldiers in the vicinity. Heimdall is overcome with that fear. Despite being powerful in his own right, this feeling is another thing entirely. He tries to resist this effect, using his willpower and centuries of experience. However, even with his long experience of fighting at the Allfather's side and overcoming his fears, that is not the only effect Hades' helmet has. Heimdall is trying to keep his mind focused, forgetting Hades in the process, who has appeared in front of him. The bident shoots forward and reaches Heimdall's stomach. But he is saved in the last possible moment, by another man, shining somewhat, who pulls Heimdall away. The bident gives Heimdall a cut, which is deep but not quite fatal. The newest fighter suddenly shouts at Hades. For ASGAAAARD. Fall ye back before the blade of Balder. Balder swings his giant blade at Hades, who is surprised to see Balder know his position. But the god of the underworld still has his helmet of darkness on, pressuring Balder. A sudden bright light appears in front of Balder, blinding Hades into his surprise, pushing the darkness away, making him visible again. There ye are. Balder shouts and attacks Hades again. The two continue to clash and move across the battlefield. Persephone rushed to her mother, Demeter, who was having more trouble with Frigga or Freya than she liked to admit. She was one of the Olympians and should have been more powerful, but Frigga was the queen of her pantheon and the goddess of the hunt. She was powerful in her own right and used to fighting, unlike Demeter. She bobbed and weaved through the vines and tree trunks that Demeter created and approached her. However, before she could harm her, a loud shout was heard, and hundreds of thousands of flower petals flowed through the air, hitting her. Mother. Persephone shouted. Daughter. You're all right. Finally, we can be together. Come, let us leave You're not going anywhere, Frigga's sharp voice was heard. I am Freya Ferdatir, and none of you will leave here alive. In a burst of speed, the queen of the Norse pantheon shot forward and cut through vines after vines. Demeter conjured to defend them. She was suddenly greatly worried about Persephone and used all of her power at once. But the goddess of the hunt handles all of it quickly and approaches them. Persephone ignores her mother's words of fleeing and supports her in attacking Frigga. With a wave of her hands, dark vines with an eerie feeling rise from the ground subtly and entwine Frigga's feet. Her time in the underworld had its effects on Persephone. She wasn't the same woman as she was before. The sudden halt makes Frigga stagger slightly, but just enough to matter. In a fight, the smallest of missteps count, and that was a great one. Demeter seized this opportunity well and created fields that surrounded Frigga, starting to entwine her limbs. Her arms, legs and her body were grabbed, and her movement was stopped gradually, while she tried to cut through all of it. She looks around desperately, keeping her cool, but looking for a fast solution to this problem. What she finds are the eyes of someone she knows well. Son. Demeter has a livid expression on her face, as if she had seen her daughter in harm's way. She makes the plants squeeze slowly, intent on having them suffocate and or break Frigga's neck. Before she can do that, though, a subtle energy settles on her head. Demeter shakes her head in confusion and looks up. Instead of seeing her daughter Persephone, she sees Frigga in her place and becomes angry again. How did you get out? And where's Persephone? Demeter shouts. What? Demeter starts attacking the woman she sees as Frigga, not realizing that a spell has been placed on her. An illusion of a high degree has her under its control, making her release the plants, about to kill the real Frigga and attack her own daughter. A second later, the same spell lands on Persephone and makes her attack her mother as well. Frigga falls to the ground, taking a deep breath and smiling, seeing Loki's spell. She shakes her head slightly, but doesn't waste this chance. Grabbing her blade, she charges and swings it through the air, about to decapitate Demeter. Her powerful and experienced senses warn her of danger. Using incredible dexterity and speed, Frigga stops abruptly and falls back, dodging a large slug of purple fluid. The purple sludge lands on ground, where she stood a millisecond ago and melts through it. You are not to harm, our Lord's sister and niece. Lord Poseidon would not be happy about that, Tentacruel says. Frigga observed the newest addition to her fight. It was clear that he was a member of Poseidon's army. He looked like an evolved jellyfish of some kind. And she was right. Picture. Who are yo? Tentacruel shot 2 balls of water at Frigga, making her dodge the attacks. Tentacruel was a member of Poseidon's army, so he was naturally taught not to waste time on playing the villain and monologuing. Tentacruel was a powerful general skilled in poison and water conjuration and manipulation. Frigga didn't waste time and shot forward, dodging the balls of poison flying her way and slashing her blade through the air, intent on ending this fast. Her blade slashed through Tentacruel as he was about to throw another ball of poison at her. This one was larger and steamed as it touched the ground. Tentacruel had a surprised look on its face as it fell to the ground in a puddle of water. His face was one of utter disbelief. Frigga looked down in disgust and then turned around, starting to make her way to Demeter and Persephone again. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Her eyes widened, however, as she suddenly felt very weak throughout her body. It is unwise to turn your back on your enemy, the voice of Tentacruel said. Frigga turned around after having dropped her large sword. She didn't want to, but the weakness spreading and the poison which was affecting her caused her muscles to spasm and grow weak without her being able to do anything about it. From the ground, the dead figure of Tentacruel turned into water and rose again from the puddle, good as new. In another area of the battlefield, the figure of Ares was flying through the air, after having been blasted away by Odin's release of his full power. He tried to stop his flight, but hit someone instead. The raging god of war looked at the unfortunate being he had hit and looked into the ripped and muscular form of a blacksmith. Well, if it isn't the one Hera threw off Olympus. Did you enjoy your time with your new daddy, Hephaestus? Ares chuckled. Hephaestus held his heavy warhammer over his shoulder and cracked his neck with his other hand. I did actually. Thank you for asking. Pathetic, to see you fight for uncle instead of your own father. Zeus was never my father. Hera conceived me without Zeus' help. But she's unimportant now. Poseidon is more of a father than Zeus could ever be. Just look at you. And Ra is warmer than Hera. I don't fault her for that, though. Living with Zeus and you other cunts, would make my heart stop beating as well. So you have a mouth on you, yes. Can you use that hammer as well as your mouth? Ares asked. Why don't you find out? Hephaestus asked. Ares laughed out loud, and then his anger peaked at being challenged by the outcast. With a mighty roar, he charged forward. He was like a massive bull, intent on ripping Hephaestus to shreds and quenching his rising bloodlust. Hephaestus looked at Ares and didn't move. He slowly raised his left hand, with his lips pursed, and activated a hidden mechanism. A small portal opened up to his personal storage, and from it a golden chain shot out. The chain started to wrap around Ares from different angles and bound him more and more. The strength and durability of the chain grew stronger with the target having higher divinity. And since Ares was constantly growing as the war went on, this was the best thing for it. Ares looked at the golden chain and tried to pull as hard as he could, wanting to get free. But there was nothing to be done. The monstrous anger shot through the roof as he shouted at Hephaestus. What is this? Enkidu. Quite a useful tool. Poseidon gave me the idea. Fight smarter, not harder, he told me. But that doesn't mean I didn't train, on the contrary. Allow me to demonstrate. Hephaestus took a step forward, and with the power to break the earth, he swung his massive warhammer and smashed it against Ares' face. The sound was very satisfying. Boom mm. There are quite a few characters present right now. We'll cull the herd eventually, don't worry. Also, respect the new Hephaestus. He's a beast. 27 comments 0 vote. A war to be remembered v. Chapter. The Queen and the Tide. The battlefield was chaos. Water, fire and other elements met, steel met flesh, and divine ichor and blood spilt freely on the ground. Hera stood on the fragmented edge of the war, her armor stained with some blood and debris. Her breath was short and came in angry bursts. Her staff, which she used as a weapon, was heavy in her hands, and her limbs ached from fighting. She hadn't done much of it, and her fighting wasn't that intense either. But since she was born, Hera hadn't really fought much. However, no matter what her body felt like, the ache she felt in her heart was far worse. Ares, her son, such a powerful god he is, had been humbled by Hephaestus. That sight, the sound of Hephaestus, warhammer cracking against his head, rang louder in her ears than the racket of the battle around her. She should have felt outrage. She should have gone to his aid and done something. But instead, she felt regret. Hephaestus, her son, the son she had cast away, rejected for his flaws, disfigured and thrown off Olympus. Yet it was he who stood at Poseidon's side, proud, strong, and with loyalty and strength, without the disfigurement she had hated so much. It was Poseidon who had taken him in, offered him a place, and given him something no one else had, dignity and love. She felt it. Hephaestus saw Poseidon as his father and that woman, as his mother. Not her. Not Hera, who had given birth to him. She saw it now. She had always seen it, really, Poseidon's mind. His decisiveness and pride. His refusal to entertain her arrogance or allow her antics to go unpunished. The way he called her out when she postured, when she schemed, when she masked pain in pride and rage. He was never kind about it. No. Poseidon had always been cuttingly sharp and cold. He was very proud, but he had been right. Now, seeing the raging, passionate storm that was his marriage to Ra, so different from the silent, pathetic ruin that was hers with Zeus, she felt the weight of every choice she had made. He had told her about it, warned her about Zeus, and shared with her what happened to Métis. She didn't listen. Suddenly, she was attacked. Dozens of sharks, large and disfigured, leaping from the water on the ground, tearing through the battlefield like scythes through wheat. Hera spun around, using her staff and striking them down one by one. She filled her staff with divine energy and managed to destroy them, but they just kept coming, circling around her, and testing her limits. One sprang out of the water behind her and lunged at her, its teeth biting into her arm. Ah! Hera screamed and drove her staff into its eye, but another grabbed her leg. Ah! And another tore into her side. Pain assaulted her brain as she felt herself weaken. The sharks were taking bites out of her and drinking her ichor. She dropped to one knee, blood leaking from her mouth. Enraged, she stabbed her staff into the sharks and killed them. A shadow loomed over her, blocking the sun. Cack. A clawed, large and powerful hand reached down and grabbed her by the neck, lifting her into the air. Riptide. Picture. The monstrous general of the solar tide's pantheon, the shark that walked like a man and consumed to grow in strength and power. His body shimmered with wet, white and blue muscles, his eyes glowing with intelligence. He looked at her with something almost like curiosity. You fight well, Queen of Olympus, he rumbled, voice deep and rough. As if it came from the deepest parts of the ocean. But this is not your war anymore. Hera choked and tried to struggle. Her limbs thrashed, sparks of golden energy flickering around her, but Riptide didn't flinch. Her strength was nothing to him, not after his soldiers had drained her massively and weakened her. Poseidon does not wish to see you killed, he said, tilting his head as though weighing her. Hera stopped struggling, but still held onto his arm with hers. Her chest heaved as she looked at him, really looked at him. Not the monster, not the general, but who he represented. Poseidon didn't want to see her die. So there was a warm aspect to him, which was directed at her. You, follow him. Her voice was strained. You'd die for him. I would, Riptide said without hesitation. We all would. But not out of fear. Because he makes us want to. He made me. There was a long silence between them. Then Riptide spoke again. Why do you fight for them? You know your king is a liar and are pissed. You know what Zeus is. So why stand on his side? Hera didn't answer immediately. Her limbs trembled with more than pain as the anger wore off. The ichor dripping from her wounds drenched the remaining pieces of fabric she wore. She was healing slowly. There are things I can't control, she whispered at last, her voice brittle. Things I started. Things I'm bound to. Maybe I choose this. But it's not that simple. Not anymore. Riptide stared at her for a long moment and then into the distance. Then, without warning, he opened his hand. Hera fell to the ground, coughing violently. I could kill you now, he said, turning away. But you're not my enemy. Not yet. Stop fighting, or I will return to kill you. I am interested in tasting Olympian flesh after all. Hera looked up at him, the war raging behind her, the sky split with lightning and flame, showing where Zeus and Hera were clashing and the others who were supporting either side. Riptide and the sharks left. On Ra's side of the battlefield, things were taking a turn. 60 Oceanids and 20 nymphs, the huntresses of Artemis, made it across the battlefield to protect and fight alongside their goddess. Their eyes burned with blind devotion, pulling back their strings and firing their arrows. Their target was clear, Ra. But the Solar Queen did not stand alone. Not even close. And the huntresses of Artemis weren't worth her time. Thetis, Eurynome, and a wave of Nereids formed a protective line in front of Ra in her battle, standing in armor crafted by Hephaestus. The two who had saved him and brought him to the sun's tide pantheon were special to Hephaestus. They weren't born for battle, but they were now equipped for it. Each one carried a small water gourd on their hips, crafted by Hephaestus and enchanted to unleash jets and blades of water with every swing or motion, mimicking a style akin to the waterbenders. The two sides met. Oceanids shot arrows through the air like rain. The Nereids responded by waving their hands through the air and creating waves of water, which turned to spears. The ground was slippery and red. Water shot through the air, blocking arrows and flinging attackers aside, while creating simple constructs to attack the huntresses. For a moment, the Nereids held their own and were even pushing the skilled hunters back. But as it were, this was war, and the tides could change at a moment's notice. All it took was a single arrow. FWOOSH. Eurynome jerked. A look of shock could be seen on her face. A long, obsidian-tipped arrow pierced her chest. Eurynome. Thetis screamed. The other Nereids hesitated, stunned as their sister, once a conquest and woman of Zeus, fell to her knees. Blood spilt down her chest and to the ground. Thetis dropped to her side, catching her before she fell. Eurynome's eyes fluttered, her mouth working to say something, but before she could, another arrow came. And another. FWOOSH. One pierced a Nereid's throat and flew out the other side. Another hit Thetis, but before it could pierce her heart, Eurynome pushed her aside and took the blow herself. The arrow pierced her chest from the side and made her fall to the ground. No! Thetis cried, cradling her. From the back, a figure approached, clad in a lion's skin, bow still warm in his hands. Heracles. He lowered his weapon with casual disdain, his eyes scanning the scene with disinterest and arrogance. Heracles, the half-god son of Zeus, who was supposed to complete 12 labors, but hadn't done so, not yet. Zeus had called him to fight in the war, as he was powerful. The huntresses paused at the sight of him. Many of them hated him, some for his deeds, others for his arrogance and some because he was male. But he was here now, fighting on their side. He didn't care about the chaos or the pain. He simply knocked another arrow. The war moved on. But Thetis did not. She held Eurynome close, ichor staining her hands, and deep sadness and pain could be seen in her eyes. Heracles took aim again and fired the arrow. As Heracles loosed his next arrow, the water on the ground suddenly erupted. From the water puddles and blood on the ground leapt horrors of fang and muscle, sharks, hundreds of them, commanded by their general after he saw the Nereids, need of assistance. Wherever water had pooled, spilt gourds from fallen Nereids, even the sweat-slick grass trampled underfoot, sharks emerged. They burst from the ground with jaws wide in only one objective, to consume and kill. The battlefield had become their ocean, their fighting ground. They appeared among the huntresses, crashing into their tight formations and tearing them apart like paper. One oceanid screamed as a shark surprised her and bit into her stomach. The blood and a large chunk of flesh and intestine were ripped out, and left her momentarily shocked once more. Only for another shark to appear and bite into the left side of her chest and kill her. A nymph hunter spun around with her bow in her hand to fire an arrow, but was tackled to the ground, her scream ending in a gurgle as the shark bit her head off and then consumed the rest of her. The leader of the huntresses stood firm amid the chaos, her eyes sharp, fearless and calculating even as blood soaked the ground. She wasn't like the others, she moved with incredible skill honed over centuries, experience, and bloodlust. With a calm breath, she fired 2 fire-infused arrows directly into the gaping mouth of an incoming shark. It detonated in a splash of gore, sending teeth and bone into the air. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Lyra, she shouted, seeing one of her closest companions paralyzed by fear as a massive shark burst from a nearby puddle. She leapt toward her friend, yanking her to safety just as the shark bit into her. Its jaws clamped down on her arm instead. She gritted her teeth, refusing to scream, even as the beast thrashed and tore at her. With her free hand, she pulled an arrow from her quiver and rammed it into the shark's skull. It spasmed and died, still locked onto her arm. Another shark surged toward her, refusing to give her any respite. Without hesitation, she ripped the same arrow from the corpse in front of her, turned, and buried it into the throat of the next attacker, dropping it before the shark could bite. But the first shark's jaws remained fixed on her arm. Breathing heavily, she looked at Lyra, whom she hoped to see safe, but widened her eyes as she saw her close friend look down at her missing stomach and then at her mangled limb. There was no time. With pure rage, she drew a short sword from her side and cut off her arm. The blade sliced clean through, and her severed arm fell to the mud, still held in the shark's mouth. Blood poured freely, but she acted quickly, using a cloth to close the wound. With the sword in her remaining hand, she continued fighting, now with twice the fury she displayed before. This hadn't gone as she had thought. The huntresses tried to regroup, forming defensive lines, calling out orders, but for each shark they killed, more seemed to rise from the battlefield itself. The Nereids saw the sharks fighting on their sides and attacked again. Their water gourds hissed and burst with water, but there was no more strategy or order. Screams and blood filled the air. Heads vanished in a blur of crimson. Torsos were torn open. Arms and legs splashed into puddles, and shark corpses littered the ground, next to the huntresses and Nereids. From the back, the large, ripped figure of Riptide stepped forth. His presence announced another change in the slaughter. The earth quaked slightly beneath him with every stride. His eyes locked on Heracles, who smashed his club through another shark. The power of Heracles was enormous, and he didn't have the same problems that the weak huntresses had. You've done enough, Riptide told the Nereids, who stood stunned among the dying. Pull back. Let me handle this one. Heracles straightened and grinned at the new challenge. They stared at each other. Warrior and monster. Supposed Greek hero and predator. They said nothing. Then they charged. This war is going to take a while. If you don't want to read this, it will take quite a few chapters before it's done. 25 comments 0 vote. A war to be remembered v. The ground cracked beneath the thunder of their charge. Riptide lunged first, his large fist pulled back, and then shot forward. Heracles answered with a low grunt and swung his club with terrifying precision, meeting the shark general's strike head-on. Boom! The force of their collision sent a shockwave rippling across the battlefield, hurling nearby corpses, Nereid and Oceanid alike, through the surroundings. Riptide slashed his claws through the air, but they scraped against the Nemean lion's pelt. The indestructible skin deflected the blow and continued to protect the Greek hero. Heracles remained unfazed and pressed forward. He slammed his club down vertically, using his massive strength. Riptide darted to the side, using unnatural speed, which belied his size and lunged to bite into Heracles' side, but again, Heracles moved the pelt and the massive shark's teeth met the indestructible defense. Heracles narrowed his eyes. He saw the change. Riptide wasn't done, not even close. Heracles had a lot of experience fighting dangerous creatures, and so he saw Riptide as nothing more than another beast. The shark general's aura began to rise again, his muscles swelling from the power he had gained through the consumption of prey. The Nemine-clad demigod grunted in satisfaction and stepped forward. You want to brawl? Fine. Let's see what your fists can do. Riptide didn't answer. He just lunged forward. Fists met fists. Boom. Asterisk. Their blows collided, sending out more ripples that cracked the ground beneath their feet. Heracles ducked a hook and drove his own punch into Riptide's gut, but the sharkman barely budged this time, biting through the pain and damage. His body had become tougher, denser than it was before arriving at this battlefield. He retaliated with an uppercut that connected and snapped Heracles' head back. The demigod stumbled a step, but only one. He grinned. The bloodlust he had inherited from his father showed right now, as he felt his fighting spirit soar. Now we're talking, he shouted. They went at it. Blow for blow, flesh against flesh. One was a legend in strength and combat, the other a monster forged in the deep ocean, growing stronger with every bite and meal. Heracles' punches were like thunderstorms, shaking the air with each hit, and sending vibrations through flesh and organs. Riptide fought like the beast that he was, no refined style, just sheer power, aggression, and explosive savagery. And it seemed to work. For a time at least. A left hook from Riptide smashed into Heracles' ribs. A straight punch from Heracles dislocated Riptide's jaw, the force shaking his brain. Riptide grabbed Heracles by the waist and slammed him into the ground, but Heracles punched through the ground and reversed their position, landing elbow strikes into the sharkman's head from above, further cracking his head. Blood sprayed, but neither backed down. They roared and clashed again, two titans not physically, of course, but in the way of their actions and how they used their strength. But it was not as equal as it may seem initially. The demigod of pure strength was doing better than Riptide. And he improved. You're persistent, Heracles boomed. Riptide said nothing. His glowing eyes narrowed as he felt the damage accumulating, while Heracles looked more or less the same as he did in the beginning. It was that damned Nemean lion. Its defense was impeccable, and there was nothing Riptide had against it. What's more, Heracles' strength seemed to be growing as the fight went on. It was as if he were digging deeper into his potential, now that someone had arrived who could give him a proper fight, the way he wanted. Knowing he couldn't break through the pelt, Riptide signaled with a shrill whistle for his soldiers. From the pools around them, where they had retreated to and awaited their master's call, the sharks rose again, 20, 30, maybe more, circling Heracles. They attacked him together. Their sharp shark teeth met hard resistance, however. They scraped across the unbreakable skin. Heracles spun in place, club swinging in wild, powerful arcs. Each swing hit multiple sharks, smashed bones, and killed beasts with swift ease. Blood and gore flew through the air and painted a violent picture. He moved like a force of nature, divine strength matched with brutal lack of mercy. One shark finally managed to latch onto his leg. Another onto his arm. But he didn't care and still continued to fight. Riptide used this moment and attacked again. This time, from behind Heracles, using his momentary lack of attention, he managed to sink his teeth into Heracles' unprotected upper arm. Blood sprayed all around. Raahhh. Heracles roared. With a mighty flex of his muscles, turning them harder than stone, Heracles turned himself and grabbed Riptide by the neck. He pulled back his right arm and sent out a brutal punch, shattering Riptide's teeth. Then another one, causing multiple ribs to be crushed. Then, before Riptide could get distance between them, with both hands, Heracles drove his arm through Riptide's chest. Crack. Asterisk. Riptide gasped in pain and spat blood. Heracles, face twisted in disgust as he hurled the sharkman to the ground, like a sack of dirt. Disgusting creature, he muttered, stepping back. Heracles looked at the big heart in his hand and crushed it, dropping it on Riptide and already focusing on something else. Riptide twitched, his body bleeding and broken. Heracles turned his back, scanning the battlefield and looking for his next fight. Not far from where the two combatants clashed, Hera stood among the chaos, one hand clutching her neck where Riptide had lifted her earlier. The pain still throbbed, but it was the humiliation that stung sharper. Her body was healing, but the feeling remained. Beside her, Aphrodite's lips curved in a faint, satisfied smile. You look good in pain, Aphrodite purred. Hera shot her a glare but said nothing. This was neither the time nor the place. She despised the most beautiful goddess like all the other females on Olympus did. Aphrodite, on the other hand, also didn't like the others, and while she usually didn't bother with them, instead filling her time and herself with male company, she did despise Hera. The battle raged around them, and Hera's pride would not let her descend into a petty spat, not yet. They both turned as a loud impact drew their attention. Atlas, the titan of strength and endurance, was in the thick of it, effortlessly swatting aside Norse warriors like they were little more than insects. Atlas had changed since he was alive. Each swing of his massive arms sent bodies flying and caused the ground to shake with every step. Aphrodite tilted her head, eyes glinting. She turned to Hera, looking at her in arrogance. "Watch and learn," she told the Queen of Olympus and walked forward. With a sway of her hips and a voice dripping with allure, she approached the Titan. Her beauty radiated like a weapon in the battlefield haze, divine charm rolling off her in invisible waves. Together with her special belt, which made her look irresistible, she was confident that there was no one, especially males, who could ever resist her. Aphrodite saw herself as the peak of female beauty and the image of lust and desire. She addressed Atlas, her tone akin to a siren's call meant to bend even the strongest will. "Mighty Atlas," she cooed, her voice low and intoxicating, "put down your rage and come to me. There are sweeter victories than the slaughter of meaningless mortals." Atlas paused mid-swing, his gaze falling on her. He stood upright and stared at the goddess of beauty and lust without saying anything in return. For the briefest instances, it seemed as though Aphrodite might have his attention. She smiled and moved forward, approaching the Titan. However, as she arrived in front of him, then his massive fist suddenly shot forward like a mountain, and in that heartbeat before impact, Aphrodite's eyes widened in surprise. The knuckles struck squarely into the center of her face with a sickening crunch, driving the skin and muscle back against the bone. The force warped her usually impeccable features as her head snapped violently to the back, ichor bursting from her lips, nose and eyes in a golden spray. The sound of splintering bone cut through the cacophony of battle as her jaw crushed inwards, her golden hair whipping around her like a flag in the shockwave. The blow forced her head back, and her body followed, legs leaving the ground as the Titan's power hurled her away. Boom. Asterisk. Aphrodite's body was catapulted backwards, zooming through the air like a rocket, before leaving the battlefield entirely, not being seen by anyone again. Hera watched the exchange with wide eyes, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she felt no satisfaction, only a grim reminder that here, strength mattered far more than beauty. But then, a small smile did make its way onto her face, thinking about what she would be able to say should Aphrodite ever think herself to be irresistible again. However, Atlas suddenly gains her attention as he takes a step forward. She doesn't get to think too much about it, though, as the ground begins to rumble. A deep, roaring crack split a large part of the battlefield, scattering fighters from both sides as a fissure tore through the earth. From the dark chasm rose an immensely large shadow, a figure so colossal it dwarfed even the Titans. A large hand shot up and grabbed the edge, scaring the weaker members of the pantheons, and from it, the individual revealed itself. The eyes of almost everyone widened as they saw what Gaia had birthed and released on the battlefield. Giants. The eldest giant, Alcyoneus, the bane of Hades, emerged with a roar that shook the air. DaoistqZxYMH. His towering form blotted out the sun, throwing a monstrous shadow across the area. His massive foot lifted before slamming down toward Atlas, intent on crushing him into the ground. The power the giant could unleash was unlike anything the Greek pantheon had ever experienced. While it was Poseidon who had dealt with Atlas, Zeus and his demigod son, Heracles were some of the most physically powerful members of their pantheon. Atlas braced himself and caught the massive foot. The earth groaned under the weight of the descending foot, but the Titan of strength held it with both arms, his muscles bulging as he pushed back, buckling to his knees as he did. Inch by inch, he stopped the crushing force, his muscles snapping with effort as he forced the entirety of Alcyoneus' limb upward. More cracks split the earth as more giants climbed forth from Gaia's cradle. Polybotes, the bane of Poseidon, the main enemy of this war, climbed to the surface, wielding a massive trident and a net dripping with green venom that sizzled where it fell. His eyes locked on the distant figure of Poseidon. Clitus followed, the bane of Hecate, his body wreathed in dark flames, capable of burning magic, his hands weaving spells of lethal intent already. Then came Mimas, the bane of Hephaestus, a walking fortress of molten rock and iron, his fists dripping with magma as he searched for the Hephaestus whom Gaia deemed as an equal threat as the others. Behind them, more giants, unnamed but no less deadly, poured into the battlefield, each spreading raw, destructive power, the exact opposite of the gods they were meant to destroy. The ground shook with their arrival, and the war shifted again, proving that Gaia was not a bystander in this war but was participating actively in her own way. And the children she had created this time were impressive.